Good morning, everybody, and welcome to today's meeting of the People Scrutiny Committee. First of all, have I got any apologies for absence?
Yes, Chair, we've got apologies from Councillor Riley, Councillor Christopher Edwards. We've got a couple of members online, and I think apologies from Councillor Maria Stevens, who is being substituted by Councillor Peter Strong.
Lovely, thank you. Any declarations of interest anybody would like to make at this point, or would you like to do them as each item arrives?
Chair, I'll just declare now, in light of issues that may be discussed later, that I'm an independent member of the Iron Bevan Health Board.
Thank you, Councillor. Anybody else? So we haven't had any requests to speak at Public Open Forum today, so we will move straight on to item 4, the Inclusion Strategy and Additional Learning Needs Policy. Sorry, bear with us, we're just sorting out some screen sharing. Members online, we're just sorting out a little technical issue in the chamber, but we won't be long.
Bore da, everybody. I'm Dr. Morwenna Wagstaff, Head of Service for Inclusion in Learning Skills and Economy Directorate, and myself and Jackie are really pleased to be here this morning and welcome the opportunity to meet with members as part of the People Scrutiny Committee with regards to our inclusion strategy and our additional learning needs, our ALM policy. We've been working on these key documents for a long time and welcome the opportunity to be here today. I'm sure that you have all read the documentation circulated, so and obviously we're happy to answer any questions that you may have. But first we thought it might just be helpful for us to run through a few of the key elements. Thank you, Robert. So the Community and Corporate Plan, if you could click us on, Robert, that would be all right. Thank you. The Community and Corporate Plan outlines how we want Monmouthshire to be a learning place where everybody has their best possible start in life and the opportunity to learn and reach their potential. As an inclusion service, we work closely with all of our schools and settings to focus on developing inclusive approaches where all children and young people can feel a sense of belonging and succeed. Central to our ambition of a truly inclusive educational system is the notion that we value difference and diversity and place every learner and their family at the centre of decision making so that their unique starting points, strengths and educational needs are well understood and any barriers to learning or access in school are addressed. One of the many actions underway in this area includes the creation of this new inclusion strategy that recognises the challenges we continue to face post-pandemic, as well as the development of an ALN rather than an SEN, so an additional learning needs rather than a special educational needs policy that reflects our current provision and practice. We're very proud of the wide range of work going on in the broad inclusion services and remain focused on ensuring that our provision meets the needs of a wide range of learners, including children and young people from vulnerable groups and those with additional learning needs. An area of continued focus and improvement is to ensure that universal provision in our schools and settings effectively supports all learners and focuses on early identification of need to address all barriers to learning and school attendance. All of our schools and settings in Monmouthshire are experiencing increased demand for additional support for some of their learners, possibly the inevitable consequence of the pandemic. We will continue to develop a high quality and effective response within our school settings and across the local authority that are measured and considered in the way that we meet the needs of learners where they are at now. All of our work within the Learning Skills and Economy Directorate Inclusion Services are underpinned by certain principles, the aim of which is to achieve a consistent, high-quality, inclusive educational offer that can meet the needs of children and young people from vulnerable groups in preschool, mainstream and specialist provision. We are all working towards ensuring more effective and equitable services that are flexible enough to respond to the ever-changing challenges we face. It is always our intention to focus as far as is possible on early intervention and preventative work, to work collaboratively with others to ensure that situations do not escalate further and that the best interests of the learner and their family are held central. In Monmouthshire, we aim to provide high-quality support and provision for vulnerable learners, working together with children, young people and their families to coordinate inclusive and equitable policies and practices. In both the inclusion strategy and the ALN strategy, we use the term vulnerable learners, which is used by both the Welsh Government and Estyn as a way of describing those learners who may be more likely to experience emotional, social and developmental barriers to learning. This table outlines who we include within our understanding of vulnerable groups within our schools and settings. Key groups of learners central to our inclusion services are pupils with additional learning needs, children who are looked after or care experienced, excluded pupils and those at risk of exclusion, pupils with emotional well-being and mental health needs, including those learners who are educated other than at school, and pupils who have had adverse childhood experiences or ACEs. Not all learners from these groups will face barriers to learning or be vulnerable to underachieving. However, learners from these groups may face a range of barriers and will often require different approaches, solutions and support targeted towards meeting each of their individual needs. In addition, learners may belong to one or more of the groups at the same time, depending on their individual circumstances. For example, a learner may be a child looked after, have additional learning need, and be eligible for free school meals. As we progress our understanding of what a truly inclusive educational system needs to be, we learn to respond better to our learners and their families who are presenting with increasingly complex needs that require increasingly complex solutions. In terms of, in October 2022, the new Head of Service for Inclusion role was created and I started in this new role. This was an exciting development for what was the Children and Young People's Directorate, as it refocused the notion of Monmouthshire as an inclusive authority with the aspiration that all children and young people remain in their local schools, settings and communities. The restructure afforded the opportunity to pull together the key professionals and teams supporting our most vulnerable groups to strengthen collaboration and increase capacity to support our schools and settings to meet the varied and often intertwined complex needs of vulnerable children and young people. The inclusion team continues to evolve, and since autumn 2022, we now include the Vulnerable Learner Lead, with a focus on managing and reducing exclusions and the needs of children who are looked after or care experienced. The Education Support Team, which was created in April 23, which is now fully staffed and rolled out to support primary schools with pupils at risk of disengagement or exclusion. The Additional Learning Provision Partnership Lead started with us in September 2023 and has been seconded as a member of staff from a secondary school, and the aim is helping us to quality assure all of our additional learning provision, including our specialist resource bases. And in the summer of 2024, we increased our ability to meet the needs of children who are looked after or care experienced and those with complex additional learning needs through the expansion to our statutory officer team with a role specifically focused on our children looked after population and the creation of a commissioning officer. And most recently, the community-focused schools lead has moved across to the Directorate and into the Inclusion Service. This is an exciting opportunity as it enables us to expand the notion of schools and settings as central features of all of our Monmouthshire communities. The structure of Monmouthshire Inclusion Services and associated systems ensure that inclusive and equitable practices are in place to encourage the presence, participation and achievement of all children and young people from their local community, and that support is provided for those at risk of underachievement, disengagement and exclusion. I'm going to hand over to Jackie.
Thank you, Morwenna. As you will see in the ALM policy, Monmouthshire does not have a discrete special school for children and young people with complex additional learning needs. Monmouthshire has developed a model provision which places special education at the heart of identified host mainstream schools. This model supports Welsh Government's ambitions as set out in the ALN Code, which says that the Welsh Government considers that an inclusive education where all pupils access common opportunities in ways relevant to their needs and which ensures that they fully belong to the school community is of benefit to all. As indicated in this slide, there are a number of benefits to this model of specialist provision. It supports a culture of inclusion, which keeps learners close to their communities. It also creates a greater sense of valuing diversity and differences in the wider school population, as well as tolerance and kindness, which have a deeper societal benefit. Monmouthshire has invested in developing the environments of all SRB provisions and also in providing specialist training for all specialist resource-based staff. The majority of children attending resource-based provision in Monmouthshire have a diagnosis of autism, so it is really important that staff working in these settings are provided with high-quality training and resources relating to best autism practice. Through the recently developed Monmouthshire Autism in Schools and Setting programme, all SRB staff have received high-quality bespoke training, and further professional learning and training programmes are being planned. Chapter 7 of the ALN Code, my favourite chapter, I keep telling everyone, places statutory responsibilities on local authorities to keep under review all additional provision, learning provision, the ALP. And you'll notice in the slide it says must, and in the code there are a number of musts which stress that this is the statutory aspect of the code which we have to adhere to. The Inclusion Service has been very proactive in undertaking ALP reviews and in developing robust quality assurance systems for schools. And you can see in the policy document the diagram on page 16, which explains this extremely robust process. This will help ensure that high-quality systems are developed to support learners in schools and settings with ALN, and also provide, most importantly, evidence to Welsh Government and Estyn that Monmouthshire is able to identify where provision is sufficient and any insufficiencies which may need to be addressed at a strategic level.
Ooh, thank you. We'll welcome any questions.
Yes, let's see.
Councillor Jones.
And thank you for that report. It's really interesting, and it's great to see how far it's come and how united and unified everything is becoming now. I just wondered about the vulnerable learning head. Since that post has been implemented, has there been a notable effect on the numbers of pupils who have, with their absences, reduced absences, and also the levels of exclusion in relation to that? So I just wondered what effect that post has had.
So the vulnerable learner lead role has been in place since I think March 2023. So that function has always existed in terms of managing and supporting schools with exclusions in particular. I think I can't remember, but I came to Performance and Overview Committee, I want to say in the summer, to talk about the exclusion rates. Interesting whether that we've had that role specifically has a function. We, in terms of that, we have had high levels of exclusion recently, of late, over the last few years. That is a pattern that is mirrored regionally, nationally, because we are seeing some changes in the presentation of some of our young people in schools and settings. We continue to work with our schools around guidance of the use of exclusions, and obviously another piece of work within our sort of umbrella is the use of the pupil referral service and how we utilise that to support children. So I would say that we are much better at supporting and challenging our schools around exclusions, and schools have a far greater understanding of utilising exclusion as one of the tools in their toolkit. But there definitely is a sort of a trend in terms of number of children or the use of exclusion of late. And again, I'm happy to share the report I brought in the summer about the details around that and specifically that role.
Can I just come back, Chair?
Yes.
I just wondered, what measures are there? Is there a particular area of good practice anywhere in the UK that can be, followed or copied in some way or utilised? What can be done? Is it just going to get worse? I mean, how do we approach this? The high numbers of exclusion.
So we're approaching it in lots of different ways within Monmouthshire. So we are embedding, and in our inclusion and ALN strategy, you'll notice our pyramids we talk about. So our universal provision, our universal plus, our targeted and our specific. So we are front-ending, we're heavy loading our universal provision and our sort of targeted provision. So we've got programmes such as trauma-informed practice. So that is building understanding and awareness in our schools and settings about, how we respond, how we understand children who are presenting with distressed or dysregulated behaviours and approaches. We've got our emotional literacy support assistant programme, so we've got ELSAs in all of our schools, and we continue to offer that training, and again that's really well utilised. Our autism project, although the word autism is in front of that, the programme is for all schools and settings, and the understanding that we have lots of children who benefit from lots of those strategies in terms of promoting inclusion. So, for example, use of language, structure of the school day, all of those things. So all of those programmes and projects are targeted at developing that really good universal and universal plus provision in the hope that those instances don't escalate, and then there's other things around sort of supporting how to manage sort of behaviours of challenge. So there's a lot of work going in at that level, but I think further up that triangle of need, we also provide that kind of support and challenge to our schools. So we, if we see a trend around exclusions increasing, or we see particularly that children with additional learning needs are being, excluded or out of school, we try and challenge that now. And that would be a key role for the vulnerable learner lead, is that kind of support and challenge. And looking particularly at our groups of vulnerable learners, children looked after would be in that category as well, to ensure that they're getting the kind of the parity and the equitable approach that they deserve to be included. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Chair. But however, I know that Peter Strong had his hand up before me in the chat bar. So if you'd like to go first, Peter, carry on.
Okay, yeah, I pressed the wrong button again before I got to the right one. Thank you. Okay, I notice on your list of groups of vulnerable children, you include children of service families, which is clearly very good and in line with our commitments to the Armed Forces Covenant. Can I ask how you go about identifying those children, and whether you're confident that you are identifying them all, and what work you do in relation to that? While I'm on that, if I can crave your permission, Chair, can I also just pay tribute to Raglan School for their excellent work with service children. I know recently they've won a bronze award from the Supporting Service Children in Education Cymru group. So I'd like to sort of put on record appreciation for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Strong, for your question. Oh, I'm echoing.
Oh, sorry, yes, I'm just getting rid
of thank you. We have got service family. There is a service family worker who is identified, but they don't actually sit within the inclusion services. And I'm just looking because I can see. Can I hand over to Will McLean, who's in the room, because I think he knows more about that area than I do. Sorry, in terms of identifying.
Thanks, Mawena, and thank you, Chair. Good morning, committee. Will McLean, I'm the Strategic Director for Learning Skills and the Economy. We've worked really closely with the Armed Forces Covenant for a long time now to help us ensure that we are able to identify those children in schools who are part of Armed Forces families. And I think the note around those, as Councillor Strong's alluded to, it's the fact around the kind of the movements and so on, and the significant kind of turnover of schools that children might experience who have been in the Armed Forces that means that they might need some more support. So we work closely with the Armed Forces Covenant to make sure that we are able to identify those children. Where there are clusters of children in certain areas, we're able to kind of apply for grants and so on. We've done that in the past and we'll continue to do that in the future as well. Okay.
Thank you. Satisfied with that, Peter? Councillor Strong?
Yeah, can I just say, are we confident that we are identifying them all? Or have we got hidden ones? I'm particularly thinking maybe those who are from reservist families who might, before too long, end up being deployed to the Ukraine or wherever. Are we confident of identifying them all?
Thanks, Councillor Strong. I think it would be rare of me to say I'm confident of 100% coverage of something. I think it's probably a good prompt and reminder today for us to liaise with our schools and just flag that there is support and resources available to those families, and that if they're aware of any families that we might not be aware of, then they should let us know, and we'll try and capture it both ways, I think.
Okay, thank you. That's good.
Thank you. Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mawena, and your team, and thanks to all those people who work on the ground at the chalk face, as it were, because I know what that work's like. So I do appreciate everything that you do for our young people. I've two questions, which has been a bit greedy, I suppose. First of all, you must be very excited, I know I am, about the soon-to-open King Henry School. I think it's fantastic that we'll be able to be picking up our young people with additional learning needs right from the year dot, almost from preschool, and we've got them all the way through to 19. And I know I've had a look around the school, so I can see the thought that's gone into the way in which things are laid out there, and I was really, really impressed by it, and I think it's going to be fantastic. But what my question really is do we think that there will be significant cost benefits from this kind of model? So that's question number one. My second question, there have been quite a lot of reports in the press recently about the pressures of children coming out from private education as a result of increased fees. Are we seeing that pressure here in Monmouthshire? Do we have children who are coming into our system because they've come out from private education? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Butler. Thank you for your question. And yes, I think we are all a bit excited about King Henry School, and I haven't had a tour recently, so I'm looking forward to getting up there soon. Yeah, I think sort of in general, we're really excited about the potential benefits of a through school. I think particularly for children from vulnerable groups or with additional learning needs, it provides that kind of continuity and consistency in approach. It allows children to build relationships with key staff, and they have those long-lasting relationships. And one of, I think, the key areas that I'm excited about from an inclusion point of view is the transitions should be easier and smoother, and I think that often is where we find issues sort of arise, is transitioning between phases often. Obviously we work very closely with our schools and settings across the phases, and we're quite a small authority, so we have good relationships to kind of promote good transitions, but I'll be really interested to see the benefits that we're all hoping for from that element. And within the King Henry School, I don't know if you were asking specifically, but we do have an SRB is going into the King Henry School, so we have there is already some children in the King Henry SRB, and they're currently in on the Derry View site, but they will be coming across, and again that really affords a exciting opportunity for us within the SRB, the specialist provision element, to really meet the needs of a range of children from the Abergavenny area within Abergavenny, and also to have that continuity again of staffing and approaches between the phases as they move through the school. Cost benefits, I'm not sure if you're asking more generally about a 3 to 19 school or about particularly sort of the ALN elements, but as I say, I think wherever we can prevent, get involved early and support children, young people and their families by recognising and understanding their needs, obviously those situations then don't escalate. And so in terms of a cost saving, although it's sort of an anticipatory saving, we know that if we can keep children within our communities, within our local schools, and having their needs met within, local mainstream schools, that definitely is the best outcomes for those children and young people. So yes, I think there are cost savings, and I think the Through School does afford some really exciting understanding of how that kind of will play out once they're all on one site, and once we have a couple of years to see how those transitions go and what we can learn and share around sort of good practice. I don't know, Jackie, if you've got anything to add to that.
No, I would agree. I think with many parents who in the past have perhaps wanted their children to be placed out of county, for example, in special school provision, which is 3 to 19, have really welcomed the opportunity that they have a similar provision now in Monmouthshire. And I think it's extremely positive, as you say, in terms of continuity and transition, that we have that facility now, and hopefully it'll be of massive benefit to the area and the community.
Thank you. And with regards to your second questions, the sort of pressures you suggested about children coming out of private education and back into the mainstream sector, I'm going to say something really naive. Jackie might know better than me. I'm not aware currently.
No, I think we don't have significant numbers of learners leaving the independent sector to join MCC schools. But however, there is capacity in the system, and we'd obviously welcome any student who wanted to join our excellent schools in Monmouthshire. Obviously, if they have an additional learning need, then they would come through to the inclusion service through the usual process for those needs to be identified and appropriate support to be put in place if necessary. But at the moment, there's not a significant number.
No. Thank you.
So thank you for your answers. But when you say there's not a significant number, do we have some move for that is the case?
Yes, there is. There are probably around 10 or so that we can recognise, but these are children who are going from a mainstream provision into a mainstream provision. So, and as I stated earlier, there is capacity in the system, so that is not a cause for concern. They're just adding to. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. So we haven't had any with additional learning needs then?
I know of one child that is currently going through an assessment process who's come from an independent setting, and that child's in the latter years of year 10, I think. So, but I've got one child that's come through our panel.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that.
Great, thank you. Councillor Haworth.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, everyone. And same as Councillor Butler, just thank everyone for their hard work and supporting our children and young people out there. Very important, and great that we've set up this, I'll call it a unit, a new department to actually drill into our our findings and making sure that they are served in the best possible way. I'd just like to touch on the three Ds, I would, and tell me whether I'm pronouncing these right, because I sometimes can't pronounce the Ds: dyslexia, dyspraxia, and demoralicy. Am I right in saying that, the three Ds?
Possibly dyscalculia, Councillor Howarth.
Okay, because one's numbers, one's about clumsiness, and the other one is about writing and understanding, etc. Yeah. Right, okay, I got there. So, going back to the 3Ds, I can not go back very long ago. It was really difficult for residents within Monmouthshire to actually get this identified, even though they knew it was to go through the system. So my question to you this morning is has this improved? And actually, who is deciding which direction children and young people take, and what support we give them who have at least one or perhaps two or even three of the 3Ds? And secondly, my last question would be is, how much work do we do in schools with head teachers, with staff, in identifying young people with some of the 3Ds, because that is so important, making sure then their needs are looked after, because this is where this is about today, is making sure we provide the service to the families and identifying young people with these, because it wasn't good. Is it improving? And how best can we measure this now in future years? In are we delivering for these young people with these special complex 3D needs? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Howarth, for your question. I think with regards to the 3Ds, I wasn't sure what you were going to say, to be honest, when you said that, but we're talking about specific learning difficulties, and I think within Monmouthshire, our approach to inclusion, which encompasses additional learning needs or barriers to learning, would be that we are person-centred and that we look at individual needs. So we are needs-led in our service, which means that a child doesn't need a label or a diagnosis to get a particular need met. If they have it, that is also fine, but ultimately, if we're looking at their needs, we're then looking at the provision that they require to meet those needs. So in terms of supporting children with some of those needs, in particular severe and persistent literacy difficulties, but also if they have severe and persistent difficulties with mathematics, or they have some coordination difficulties, we have a service within our inclusion services called the Monmouthshire Specialist Teaching Service. So they have a specific function around supporting schools and settings to meet the needs of children with literacy-based needs or dyslexia. But in terms of, so yes, I think our schools are pretty good at identifying those things. The majority of children with those type of needs would be within our mainstream provision and having, as is required, dependent on their needs, universal plus or targeted support within schools and settings. In terms of how much work we do in schools, I will hand over to Jackie in a minute, but just to kind of highlight that we meet and share information as an inclusion service regularly with our head teachers, but also with our Elenkos, which are additional learning needs coordinators. And we have a number of forums throughout the year, which I'll hand over to Jackie to talk about, if that's okay.
Yes, there's an ongoing programme of raising awareness and training in the whole school community for the literacy and numeracy aspects of specific learning difficulties. In terms of dyspraxia, that would be a medical diagnosis, and that would be any child with dyspraxia would usually be supported by an occupational therapist, a physiotherapist, and programmes associated with that would come from the Aaron Bevan team supporting those children. In terms of dyslexia and dyscalculia, I mean, in a previous life, this was my job. I was a specialist and advisory teacher who had this role of supporting children with specific literacy and numeracy needs. I've been around a long time and things have changed quite considerably in terms of the model of support that we're offering. Years ago, it used to be the pattern that you take children out of a classroom and into a group, and they'd be separated from their peers and separated from their lessons. Now it's a much more holistic approach, and the expectation is, and from our specialist teaching team, it's about upskilling and raising awareness in all school staff of the difficulties that children may be experiencing, some reasonable adjustments being made in the classroom. The wonderful thing about living in the 21st century compared to when I started teaching, which is in the 20th century, is that now we've got fantastic technology that can support children with specific learning difficulties in the classroom, particularly if they have got severe needs around writing and spelling. And these have moved approaches and interventions on quite considerably. And this is something that we obviously are very proactive in supporting schools to use. So it is about acknowledging that we don't want children to be removed from their classrooms to have an hour of support once a week, because that's disruptive and makes them feel very different. Where individual support is required for a short period of time, obviously that's something our specialist teacher team would help organise and support in terms of an intervention. But the expectation would always be that it's about how those skills are generalised in the classroom, so that the children get maximum benefit from all the education that they're being offered. So it is, as Morwenna said, I think this is really important, and Monmouthshire does this very, very well. We're a needs-led authority. If a child has a need, we address that need, regardless of whether a child has a label of dyslexia, dyscalculia, or autism. If a child's needs is presenting in a classroom, we hope we support the capacity and the capability of school staff through our training programmes, through our Elenco forums particularly, to meet those needs in the classroom. And obviously, you know, we're learning all the time. We're reflective practitioners as a local authority and as teachers. And I think it's really important that we also consider, and we've got Dr. Lucy Doyle, who leads the specialist teacher team and also is the principal psychologist, where evidence-led. So where there's new research and new evidence about the best way to address the needs of children with complex needs, we take that on board as well. And I think there's a really good literacy document that we could share with you if you're interested, Councillor Howarth. I think you'd find that really interesting reading, and other colleagues in the council may find that useful as well, and we're happy to share that with you because that really encapsulates our approach.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. That's really encouraging. I think my point is identifying possibly Key Stage 2 children before they enter into Key Stage 3 is the identification of these young people, making sure then we give them that support, because there are probably many out there who we don't want to identify. And with budget cuts, with things which are going to happen within schools, with many things in schools which are happening probably the next 2 or 3 years, it's having that base to acknowledge and make sure that individuals it's the identification, making sure they get that early support and the families also. I mean, perhaps they realise sometimes that things aren't right, and perhaps they're allowed to continue. But staff, teachers, they are the identifiable people to bring this to the attention, making sure that the support is given. And if there are cuts and staff are under pressure, sometimes that doesn't happen, and that's where I was aiming on this, is making sure that our young people are identified quickly. They're not dragged through a system which takes too long, especially on the one where you mentioned an Iron Bevan on the health side of it, with dyspraxia. That is not good, and that's what I hope that we actually can identify and make sure staff are well trained in identifying that. Maybe for the best of everyone, that we have a look at that document and make sure that we understand it. It's understanding as well for councillors as well and for staff. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Howarth.
No, I was just going to reinforce, I totally agree with you, Councillor Howarth, and I think our professional learning offer, and again, thinking about that kind of universal provision, even when we take into account some of the needs that a child with dyspraxia may have, so the coordination, we spend some time developing our schools' capacity to understand the kind of strategies that they might utilise. So even if there is a wait time, for example, for an occupational therapist, our expectation would be that there are reasonable adjustments that they could put in place even prior to that sort of care plan being received from the health board, because as Jackie said, it's highlighting that the need before, you know, what is the provision that could meet the need, and sometimes so that kind of, that high level of professional learning that goes in at that universal and universal plus around reasonable adjustments, expectations in the classroom, what is an inclusive classroom, which includes all of these, the needs of all children like these. We try and get those at that kind of holistic level within our classrooms across Monmouthshire, and we've got some really good schools, we've got some really good examples of where that works well, and you're right, it's about identifying those children early in Key Stage 2 prior to their transition, and then flagging them up on transition to ensure that that consistent support continues when they're in their secondary education.
I was also going to mention we were invited to a Welsh Government best practice event. In fact, Monmouthshire was speaking at that event, which is great for Monmouthshire. But we also, there was a presentation from Neath Port Talbot around actually how they work with the Occupational Therapy Service and bring best practice into schools in terms of helping children who require support, particularly with dyspraxis type issues. And I think it's something we're going to follow up more on, isn't it? So we are being proactive in relation to that as well, because we recognise obviously the health boards are under pressure, as all organisations are, but if we can be creative around finding solutions, then we'll find a way forward to actually put those into our schools to support them. We've already invested in a number of sensory rooms in our primary schools and secondary schools, which is extending provision to a whole range of other children other than children in resource bases. So we are being proactive, Councillor Howarth, in recognising that we need to, you know, think outside the box sometimes when it comes to provision, but we will continue to be active in that area.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Jackie Strong.
Thank you, Chair. I've got, although I sort of really welcome this, and we're all in favour of inclusion and supporting children to be in their local communities, my background for many years was supporting deaf children and their families through the medium of British Sign Language. And so my worry is that those children will be included in provision that actually doesn't meet their needs. And I would like to ask, given all the things that you're putting in place and the plans for the future, what percentage of Monmouthshire children are then having to go outside the county for specialist provision? And also, how are we going to ensure that the needs of children, because communication is key, and communication isn't just one way, it's both ways. How are we going to support those children with quite specific and low incidence sort of disabilities or things that affect them? How do we ensure that they get the best education possible? They've only got one chance at it, and I'd quite like to hear your take on that. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that question. You're probably aware that we have a regional service, which obviously Monmouth is part of, called CENCOM, which is the Sensory and Communication Needs Team, which gives us very specific support around children who are deaf, visually impaired, or with multisensory impairments. And they are incredibly specialist areas, low incidence, as you say, and if we have children in the local authority, which of course we do, who are deaf or visually impaired, then they will help us provide the best possible educational provision for them. With regard to children who are deaf, again, going back in time, there were always resource bases within most local authorities for children who are deaf, but over time it was recognised that these weren't necessarily the best options for many children who were deaf, because they could benefit with the appropriate equipment and support from being in mainstream. And I would actually like to mention a particular, we've got a little child who's profoundly deaf in one of our primary schools, and they've invested in sound clouds in their school. And obviously, I'll, if you want more detail around that, to actually make the whole environment for that child accessible. And I think we've got examples of extremely good practice in Monmouthshire for children who are deaf and visually impaired. Now, obviously, in terms of specialist placements, we do have within the region some specialist resource bases for children who are deaf. There aren't any specialist resource bases for children who are blind, but I think we have one child in a specialist college in Worcester who is blind, and that's a historical placement. And actually, we have no children waiting to go into specialist places who are visually impaired, because they're all included in our mainstream setting. So in terms of the number of children we've got in our outer county provision for who are deaf, we've got one young man who transferred into the local authority who attends a specialist college or specialist school in Bristol. But apart from that, we don't have any other children who currently are in specialist provision for the deaf in either, I think it's Cwmbran, on Torfaen. I think we've got the specialist basis. Obviously, that could change over time. I know we've got a number of children who are deaf in our schools, and clearly if parents want to pursue a specialist provision, that is something we would consider through our usual inclusion panel processes. Is that a sufficient answer?
Thank you. I just wanted to make sure that if the need was there, and if you are truly person-centred, then you would look at not just, the day-to-day provision, but actually sort of building on that child's sort of future and future sort of links with the deaf community too.
Absolutely. And, obviously we are person-centred, and that means we put the child at the centre of everything we do, but also their families. So, it is all about having a relationship and a dialogue with parents around what they want for their child, but also listen to the voice of the child as well. It is really important that is front and centre of everything we do, and should parents wish to pursue a specialist placement, that is something absolutely we would consider. But we are very, very lucky as a region to have CENCOM, because we are supported by a highly specialist team of teachers and teaching assistants for both children who are deaf and who are visually impaired. I mean, that is an incredibly rare thing, frankly, in Wales and the United Kingdom. Other areas look at us with a great deal of envy, because we've got that specialist team that we can call on at any point and will help us make sure that any child who is deaf or visually impaired gets the best additional learning provision that we can give them.
Right, Councillor Lucas.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for allowing me to join. I just wanted to say that thank you, really, because having listened to this, I don't normally come to this committee, but I am statemented as severe dyslexic. So, and I wasn't at school found, though clearly I was, but I didn't get the opportunity to be statemented or to be recognised in it. I just got shoved out, and it's so nice to hear that what you guys are doing and how the system has changed. So there was a discussion earlier on by the lady ahead of us on the left there, I'm sorry I didn't catch your name, who was the school teacher, and how it's changed, and it has changed, and that's really good to hear. because I learnt defensive aids in respect of hiding how, and I still do, I hide my my issues by appearing to be overly confident, and people often mistake it as being an attitude, and it's not. It's just purely disguising what is actually happening to me. So I truly can say thank you on behalf of those young people. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Lucas.
Thank you, Councillor Lucas. I was just going to acknowledge that, and you know, we welcome your thanks and we will pass them on. But I just also wanted to highlight really what you've just said highlights the importance of an inclusion service rather than a separate ALN and other bit service, because what we're trying to get our schools to understand with some of our young people is they may be presenting in a certain way, and you called it attitude, but actually that might be masking or hiding something else, an unmet need. So we're trying to get our schools and settings, and they're getting pretty good at this, we've got some really good practice, to look at what the child is presenting as a kind of a communication, the behaviour is a communication very often of something that is unmet. So very often we have children who are, you know, presenting with behaviours of real challenge and concern or at risk of exclusion, and actually when we take the time to unpick that, it turns out that they're really struggling to read, or that something has happened that actually we aren't aware of, and that need hasn't been met. So those are the bits for us about highlighting the importance of the intertwinedness. Children don't fit neatly into one little box, they often sit across many, and I think that's why I'm really excited in Monmouthshire that we are an inclusion service, and it's reflected in the way that we work with each other and across what were in the past quite discrete areas that we overlap, because I think children are more complex than they look at first sight, really.
Yes, I mean, children, definitely, but it runs on into adulthood, unfortunately, as well. But for me, it's just hearing that you look further afield. So I personally would say that I recognise it in others a lot, and a lot of it is what are they not telling me? So I just wanted to say thank you for them, because it's sometimes just someone taking the time to listen to them. That's all it is, and then to find out what makes it, what is the problem. So thank you.
Thank you for sharing. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lucas. Councillor Powell.
Yes, thank you very much for this morning. It's been so interesting and so enlightening, and it's wonderful that so much is being done. How much provision is there made for children when they get to the age of 18 onwards? My grandson lives in Bromley, and he was very lucky because he had education right until he was 26. Although he had a special needs teaching, he first of all, he went to an ordinary school where they gave him extra lessons, then he had to go to a special school when he got to secondary school age. But they did carry on with it right until he was 26. Have we got the same facilities? Because obviously those are the children that would, if otherwise children from 18 on go to university and things like that and colleges. Is there any provision for them?
Yes, good morning, Councillor Powell. Yes, under the new Additional Learning Needs and Education Tribunal Act, which we're almost at the end of implementing at the end of this year, provision goes from 0 to 25, so we're mirroring the English system there. So we're now responsible for all our post-16 learners, which previously we were not, and clearly we'll be responsible for all learners post-18 and 19 when they leave school as well. So we're already very much into supporting children post-16, either going into Gwent College or into independent specialist colleges, and the same will apply for children who are leaving school. Usually if they have an IDP, they can stay in school until they're 19, and Monmouthshire was very forward thinking when it developed its specialist resource provision and including post-16 provision within the specialist resource provision. That is brilliant. Frankly, when I joined Monmouthshire, that was, I think, an act of genius, because it means that children can stay again within their schools and communities with teachers and colleagues who know them well until they are 19 into into our schools. And then it is about that next step of looking at what further education facilities are available for them, and parents and young people, because it is very much their voices at the front and centre when they're that age, and they have to actually give us permission to have an IDP when they're over 16. So we would work with them to find a college or a vocational path that was suited to their needs. So the good news is, yes, Wales is now mirroring the English law, and we would support children as appropriate in a further education placement after the age of 18 or 19.
Thank you very much. That's very good to hear. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Powell. I have a couple of questions myself now, please. First, I'd like to ask about children in education other than at school. Where we have homeschooled children in the county whose parents are choosing to homeschool them, what strategy do we have for identifying whether those children are vulnerable or at risk or have additional needs, and whether those are being met sufficiently? And is there a process to address that if it's felt that those needs might not be being met at home?
Thank you, Chair. I will start with that. So education other than at school obviously is for children who are receiving education not within a school setting, and you'll notice we've referred to that within the policy and the guidance, and actually we have a updated policy out, a consultation at the moment for our EOTAS population. Elective home education is slightly different because that is a parent or carer choosing to educate their children, themselves. Our numbers of elective home education have increased, and we have a dedicated EHE, Elective Home Education Officer, within the Education Welfare Service who tracks and monitors those numbers. And often what we explore, and actually had a conversation around a young person yesterday with one of those members of staff, the reasons for which parents are choosing to home educate their children, and if appropriate, we would establish a meeting in school to see whether it is about, unmet need or parental choice, to understand why, they're leaving education and choosing, because it obviously is a lifestyle choice for very many people who electively home educate, but equally sometimes parents feel that they want to do that because the need isn't being met. So obviously we would always try and support and challenge around that. In terms of EHE and ALM processes, shall I hand over, Jackie?
Yeah. So if a child moves into elective home education from a school and they have an individual development plan, IDP, then the local authority has to review that IDP and make a decision whether they maintain it. And in most cases, I would say that we've been through that process, we would agree to maintain it. Then we have a process that, as with every child with an IDP, that is monitored and reviewed on an annual basis at least. When a child has an IDP, within the IDP is additional learning provision, which we would then discuss with the parent whether they were able to meet the additional learning provision identified in the IDP. Very often we have very positive discussions with parents who've made this choice, who say, well, I'm going to be doing this in terms of English, or that in terms of maths, this in terms of PE or social communication activities, and we would make sure that we would make that provision is written into the IDP and monitored accordingly. Where parents are not able, or we feel they're not able to meet the needs of their child through elective home education, then a process is started where discussions are with parents and families to actually, try and work through maybe any difficulties they're having, and maybe signposting them to resources or training or other elements that they can access through elective home education, because there's a big elective home education community out there. But ultimately, if we feel that a child is not receiving the education which is suitable to their needs, and maybe that there are other issues going on, then we would take that potentially to through our education welfare service, through other to discuss whether elective home education should continue. And I think, obviously that is another kind of almost legal process that we'd have to consider. But that is something at the moment is a very rare event.
Good, thank you. I also wanted to know about children of offenders, which is mentioned, but I didn't see a huge amount of detail on. Just how you identify children of offenders and what specific support you put in place for them.
Thank you for the question. So typically, these would be identified through the school, and then we would, again, dependent on the presenting need, we would meet in a person-centred way to kind of think about the support and the need that the children, young people and their families would require. Often it's using our trauma-informed lens, because there may have been something, depending on the reason the parent has offended or the offence. But typically, and we definitely work with a number of these children and young people within our schools and settings, those needs are identified initially by the school, and then we would put that team around the pupil as is required and appropriate, and put the appropriate levels of support in place. It's a really challenging area for children and young people, particularly young children and young people, to be helped to make sense of what's gone on or what is going on, and to help them sort of develop the understanding of themselves as separate to sometimes a parent that they may very much love, obviously. So it's quite a complex issue, but definitely one where we would typically, depending again on the need, in some cases, we'd have quite heavy involvement of the educational psychology service or school-based counsellors or ELSAs. Obviously varies from child to child, and for some children that won't be a particularly problematic situation, but for other children we would recognise that is potentially a group who we would want to offer that kind of additional and enhanced support to.
Brilliant, thank you. Thank you. Councillor Butler, you wanted to come back in?
Thank you, Chair. I'm being very greedy, I know. It's just we've been talking about homeschooling, and I think Jackie may have actually answered some of my question. We must have statutory responsibility for homeschool children. Is there actually a process to physically see these children on a regular basis? If a child is at school and is absent, it's the duty of the school then to telephone the parent to check on the well-being of the child. Do we have that sort of a system set up where we can regularly check? I'm referencing really the dreadful case, and the name of the child I've completely forgotten, where a child was actually murdered.
Thank you, Councillor Butler. Yeah, really significant. We do, as I say, as part of the Education Welfare Service, which actually sits outside of inclusion services, but we work very closely with them. They do have an elective home education officer, and that officer's role is whenever a child is taken off roll of a school and the parents deregister them for the process of elective home education, they would go out and visit the family, and then I think my understanding is then they would go out and visit within a number of months to ensure that the monitoring and the planning of the education is going, and then would offer sort of regular reviews with that family. We do have the children missing in education policy that's relatively new, which is a policy that kind of puts that layer of safeguard in for children who may come out of school, to make sure that we are clear what the plan is. Are they being electively home educated? Is the education suitable, effective and efficient, I think is the language within that documentation. So yeah, we have a dedicated officer within the Education Welfare Service who leads on the monitoring of the elective home education population, and we have this overarching kind of policy which is called the Children Missing in Education policy, to try and ensure that we don't miss any children and we know where they are in terms of children coming off roll. Have you got something to add, Jackie?
Only that, and this may well change given the awful circumstances that have happened around a child who is electively home educated, parents do have a choice to say that they do not want to have any visits from local authority or any organisation. They can actually opt out of that. Now, that's obviously something we don't encourage. We obviously have a lot of we're using the officer that we have in the local authority, build up relationship with parents, and have a supportive relationship with them. But that is something currently that parents can and do, unfortunately. I mean, clearly, if there is any safeguarding issue at all, then we would refer that through our referral DTR systems and raise our concerns that way. But it is, frankly, something that I've always found, it's a challenge for us as a local authority. If parents say no, we have no legal address to actually do anything about that, unless we feel there is a significant safeguarding concern. But that is obviously something that at the moment we can't do anything about until the law changes to make that a mandatory visit.
Thank you for that, Jackie. Do we flag it up in any other way to any other organisations or authorities?
I think it would be an interesting conversation, and I'm happy to pick it up with the kind of education welfare service. I know the case that you're alluding to recently, the outcome of which was absolutely devastating. That young girl was killed. But I believe that has led, I think there is going to be a review of law and policy following that. The majority of people who choose to electively home educate their children are doing so in absolute goodwill and providing really good provision. But I think it is the worry where there are concerns. I guess the linking bit, which is all linked to the children missing education work, is if a school is aware that a parent is deregistering and there are concerns, that we would flag them up at that point, and then they would either, at the most basic level, we would request a meeting to kind of understand the reasons for the child coming off roll. But at a more, as Jackie alluded to, if there was any sort of concern about safeguarding or concerns about the reasons for deregistration, that would also be flagged up and dealt with through education welfare service processes and protocols. That there's a minimum amount of visits I think the EHE officer does, but I think there can also be an increased level if there are concerns or we want to more closely monitor the kind of the education that is being provided in the home. But yeah, I believe that there is a review of that legislation. I think that's in England, so I don't know how that will play out into Wales, but I would imagine there'll be a review of that soon. Thank you.
Thank you both.
Thank you. And I just noticed a question from Councillor Howarth as well, which is how many children have we got being home educated at the moment?
Will is going to answer that. I think I could guess, but I'm going to hand over to Will, who might have a better.
I said mine won't be. So I think it's around 150 children are electively home educated. So it is a number that has grown over time. But we can get the specific number because we do track it to that level of detail, obviously, and share that back with the committee members. Okay.
Oh, Councillor Lucas.
Sorry, I just heard that and I was just quite staggered. Is that a normal number? Is that, when you say it's raised, is it raising significantly? And if so, why? And I always worry about those at home schooled, should I? Because I think of inclusion, but I don't know. Sorry, I'm new to this committee, so I'm just wondering about that. That seems quite a lot of numbers.
Thanks, Councillor Lucas. So yeah, I would agree that the number has risen over the past period of time. There are a complex range of reasons as to why parents choose to electively home educate their children. Sometimes, as Moana mentioned earlier, that can be a lifestyle choice. And, there are some places we go to when we do our review visits, and they are homes will be set up pretty much like schools, and that's kind of one kind of part of the provision. Other people will make decisions for a whole range of reasons, and it's about us making sure we're keeping in contact with the families, making sure that they're able to access support, making sure that they access their own support networks as well. So there's a whole range of different things, but the numbers have increased all across Wales significantly in the past period. And again, we do have information and data available. So again, if you'd like us to provide a written update to the committee, we'd be happy to do that.
Sorry to ask another question, if I may. So do we provide them with funds, an allowance, or does it work like that, or do they fund themselves?
No, we don't provide them with funds or an allowance. Sometimes when there is, sometimes there is grant available, and we provide them with some kind of learning resources and materials. But it's it's not for the local authority to provide educational provision for those families.
Thank you. Councillor Powell, do you want to come back again?
Can I just quickly, on that subject, the trouble is, those children, although they're having probably a very good education and things like that, they are missing out on mixing with the other children and social side of it. Because when they go out into life, then I think they would, I hope not, but would find it not so easy to mix in with people. When you're at school, it's not just the education, the academic education, it's the mixing in with other children of all different natures, and it's one way of growing up, and I feel that they miss out on that. I don't know what you think about it.
Thank you, Councillor Powell. Yeah, absolutely. And I think elective home education has increased, as Will said, particularly since COVID. I think when parents realise that education could be different perhaps for some, but what has also increased during that time is there are really detailed, there are networks around the elective home education sort of population, and there are very often sort of groups, social groups, events that these families choose to engage with. So although they're not attending a school, my experience is very often they're part of a group that will meet up, often accessing museums and things like that when everybody else is in school, so there's access to those sort of events. So there is quite a strong network nationally, not just in Monmouthshire, for those children where it really is a conscious kind of lifestyle choice and parents are choosing for their children to have a different education. I think, as Will highlighted, really it's about us just understanding that population and ensuring that they are having the support that they require. Obviously, from our point of view, from an inclusive authority, we would love those children, young people, to be in our schools and part of the communities in which they live. But that is a right of parents and carers to educate them at home. So I hope that's answered that question. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillors, I'm not seeing any more questions. No? Okay. Well, thank you, Morwenna and Jackie and Will, for your time. Councillors, I think we've got, arising from this, something of a watching brief on trends on exclusion in our schools, whether they're continuing to rise and what we can do about that. And also keeping an eye, I think, on the numbers coming in from private education, even though we do have the capacity for that at the moment, whether that will change at any point. Will, thank you for kindly agreeing to provide us with a written update on homeschooling, matters that have arisen from today's questions. Does anybody feel I've missed anything? Is there anything else you'd like me to note?
Yes, Chair. There's one item which came up in the last discussion there. I think it'd be important for us as a committee just to highlight and urge the Welsh Government to be on track soon as the decision's been made in England about this home education, and making sure that our young people who are home educated, for whatever reason, that we can monitor them. At the moment, we can't do that on the basis of legislation. So I think that's important that we did take note of that, and that for me is a really, really important aspect of something we had from today. Thank you.
Absolutely, couldn't agree more, Councillor Howarth. Will, is that? Yeah, great, that's something Will pick up. Councillors, I'm going to take a very short break now, fetch the Cabinet member for the next item. We'll see you back at 25 past.
For the bloody meeting is over. I was opening one.
Right, thank you everyone. We'll be restarting any moment. Just bear with us. Right, welcome back everybody. We are now going to move on to item 5, revenue and capital budget proposals. First of all, I'm going to hand over to Councillor Callard, who I think is going to give us a reasonably abridged version of the budget presentation because we have all seen this perhaps several times before. Thank you, Councillor Callard. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for having me along today with the officers to talk about the budget. As you mentioned, I think for some members this will be the second or even third time that I've given the budget presentation, so I will give an abridged version of it, and I will run through the savings because I'm really interested to get to questions as quickly as possible, so we can have a good discussion around it. So just bear with me one moment, and I will share my screen. There we go. You should, I hope. There we go. I'm just going to go through to the slide where I wanted to start. Thank you, members. I'm presenting our draft budget proposals for the next financial year 2025-2026. They're based around 5 main principles, and these are planning for the future, protecting our most vulnerable, being a financially responsible council, reducing inequalities, and protecting our environment. You can see in this pie chart a breakdown of where the local authority spends its revenue budget, and for me the key takeaway here is that nearly 70% of our entire budget is spent on social care and health and on education, and actually the things which people often associate with council services make up a much smaller proportion of our budget, things like waste collections, transport, roads, leisure centres. And also this year is the first year where we've seen our social care and health budgets exceed that of our learning skills and economy budget. It's been a long-term trend, as I'm sure members will be aware, of growing demand within social care and health, but this is the first year where it's tipped over into absorbing more of our budget than education. I'd also make the point that our revenue budget of just over £200 million, that supports most of our day-to-day services, but we do have a significant additional income in terms of grant funding, which we use to support a lot of our services. And when I come onto risk, so I will briefly touch on how grant funding can somehow impact on our revenue budget. So from the current financial year into the next financial year, in order to continue to provide the same services, we've a cost pressure of £23.7 million. And you can see in these pair of stacked bars on the left how that £23.7 million is constructed. So it's service demand, inflation, pay inflation, national insurance contribution changes, borrowing costs, investment within our schools. And then on the right-hand side, you can see how we are proposing to bridge that gap, which includes our proposed council tax increase to 7.8%, our Welsh Government grant increase, savings within our service directorates, which I'll come on to, funding to cover the increased cost of national insurance contributions, and you can see that's just a straight over from the other side. And then at the very top on the right, you can see the budget gap, which we've gone into draft budget with, of £2.9 million. And this is because we are negotiating increased funding with Welsh Government in order to balance our budget. And by the time we come to our final budget, which will be published next week, that gap will be closed. So the pressures we're seeing within our services, they're predominantly made up of social care demand and inflation within that directorate. That's where we've seen significant pressure. But we're also investing in our foster care services, within our school services, within our additional learning needs provision, and I guess in parallel to that with our specialist education resource bases, which are the SRBs. We've got pressure within our home to school transport and also within our own transport and fleet, which includes things like gritters, and also some income shortfalls across our Mon Life directorate. So when we are building this budget, we know we've got this gap of £23.7 million. We are projecting increases of £15 million in our income, and that's constructed from our government grant, council tax and charges. Take that with our reduction in energy costs by £700,000 and our commitment not to use revenue reserves to support this budget, and that leaves a balance of £8 million. We can break that down. So part of that will be met by service savings, which I'll go on to talk about. That's £5.1 million, and then that leaves the remainder of £2.86 million, which we will resolve by the time the final budget is before council in March. So I'll go very briefly directorate by directorate. I'll start with learning skills and economy, which includes our education budget. We're proposing to increase that budget by 10.7%. We will be looking to make savings within that directorate. Predominantly, the savings that we'll bring forward is grant funding core staffing posts where we can, and also using our capital receipts in order to fund transformation within our schools and the specialist resource bases. We are projecting to save some money through the new King Henry VIII building, as it won't require as much maintenance as the aging building it's replacing, and also to bring Monmouthshire pupils with additional learning needs who are currently educated outside of Monmouthshire in independent placements back into Monmouthshire County Council provision at key points during their education, so we can reduce our demand on external providers and provide those services within Monmouthshire, which I think has a number of benefits. Within social care and health, we are proposing to increase that budget by, again, over 10%, by 10.6% next year, but with the following savings. Within adults and children's social care, we're looking to continue our placement and practice change agenda, where we are making sure that we're right-sizing care packages and supporting people within their communities for as long as possible. We're also looking to review our staffing to consolidate existing vacancies within our home care teams. And you'll be aware that we are going through the process at the minute, and it supports the eliminate agenda, but in Monmouthshire of purchasing suitable properties in order that we can bring some of our children's care services back in-house. We're looking to increase fees and charges on social care and health where it's prudent to do so, and also to remove the head of public protection post with a review longer term of how that service operates to make sure it still continues to perform effectively. Within our infrastructure and place budget, we're proposing an increase of just under 10%, of 9.7% next year, with savings found by increasing fees and charges. We, Cabinet took a decision in the autumn to revert to statutory distances for home to school transport. We conducted a management restructure within communities in place budget, which brings forward a saving, and also the continuation of work which started last year in utilising the old Sevenview care home to so we can use it as we can repurpose it to provide temporary accommodation for those who find themselves homeless, so we can support them getting back into more permanent accommodation. Also looking to increase income from grants with regards to building, cleaning, youth enterprise, highways, reducing our gritter fleet by extending the working hours of the vehicles that we have, and also to undertake an energy audit to identify discrepancies and potential savings. Our Customer Culture and Wellbeing Directorate, also known as MonLife, we are proposing to increase that by 3.7%, but with savings in a number of areas. We're looking to reduce our subsidy to the Borough Theatre, and in order to do that, to redesign the service that operates there to make it operate more effectively and to use the space as efficiently as possible. Within our community hubs, to realign the opening hours in order that we can make sure the demand is being met in those areas while still taking a budget saving. Our youth clubs, where we have provision in the rural part of Monmouthshire in the south of the county, to focus that on the provision within our 4 main towns. Increase the income across our leisure centres. We are proposing to conduct an options appraisal for the old station in Tinton to explore possibilities around future operating models. It could be that we continue to operate it in a different way, or we lease the site, or we sell the site, and we're not proposing to make any changes until that options appraisal done, and that will be completed at the end of the 2025 tourist season. A review of the contracts for the waste collection in our markets. Again, management structure changes in order to drive savings, and recharging officer time into capital schemes where possible. Within our People, Performance and Partnerships Directorate, we are proposing an increase of that budget by 4.3%, but with savings primarily driven by technology, specifically within Welsh translation and with our systems and payroll. So we are planning to use AI and also automated systems in order that we can reduce the labour required to deliver those services, and also to implement an apprentice-first approach within our workforce and to reduce local authority subscriptions where possible. Our resources budget is proposed to increase by 1.9%, but with savings within cybersecurity insurance by removing our cybersecurity insurance provision, a management restructure within our ICT, digital design and innovation department, and also a reduction in administration support. Our proposed council tax increase in this draft budget is 7.8%. That will add just under £11 per month onto a Band D property. It provides £5.9 million of much needed funding to sustain our service delivery. And you would have seen in the previous slides how important it is that we can, that we fund our services properly and we protect the services that ultimately protect our residents. And that's in parallel with the support that's available for people on low incomes, people who live alone, people who may be students. So every budget carries a risk. It's really our forecast of spending for the next year. As we've seen, I think, within the last few years, we've seen pressure exceed that which we've forecast, specifically within social care. That continues to be a risk. We also have risk around pay awards. They are negotiated nationally by independent pay bodies, and when we build the budget, we have to put in our, I suppose, using the intelligence we have, our best guess at the time. It may be that those pay awards vary from our assumptions. The employer's national insurance contributions, we have budgeted in a certain amount for allocated funding for that. There is some uncertainty around how funding will be allocated for indirect employees and how some of our contracted services may pass cost onto the local authority. And also I mentioned earlier about specific grant levels. We fund a large proportion of our service. We probably receive well in excess of £100 million a year in various grants, and how those grants come throughout the year and the quantum of those grants, it can have an impact on our revenue budget in terms of how we support the services that are funded by those grants. Our capital programme is going to continue to support the council priorities in line with the community and corporate plan, but we are proposing a further investment of £2.3 million to be made in our key infrastructure. This is predominantly highway structures, carriageways, flood alleviation, footpaths, public rights of way, and also our property estate. The budget consultation ends this week. It's been going on for 4 weeks. We've had a great opportunity to share these proposals with specific interest groups, with people who use our services, with professionals within our education sector, and also with the public. It's been a very positive process, and I think engagement levels have been good from the events that I participated in, and I'd encourage all members to encourage your residents within your ward to engage with the budget, to read it through, to provide feedback within the online questionnaire, and we will be collating that information and using it in order to inform our final budget proposals. So that's the end of my presentation. I know it was a bit of a whistle-stop tour, Chair, so I apologise for that, but I'm happy to take any questions.
No, that's great. Thank you, Ben. Councillor Howarth, you up first.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and good morning, everyone. Just a quick question before I get into my main questions, which I'll put back in the hands up function later on, is the Cabinet member's very confident there that the 2.9 million is coming off the Welsh Government. He said that. Could you tell us what caveats will be in the 2.9? Because under my understanding, Welsh Government just doesn't have money because you can't meet the budget. Is there any caveats going to be put in the 2.9? Because sitting on other organisations where our friends in Cardiff top up because budgets can't be met or there's shortfalls, they put caveats in there. Is there any caveats within that 2.9? And secondly, we give the impression that it's so much on a bandee, but we haven't included the police and the police crime commissioners fund or their precept that they're going to take off our residents within this as well. When will that be due? Will that be due to be given to the public domain very soon, or will we not see that till the last moment? How much residents are going to have to fine to or going to have to pay every month now on top of their hard-earned cash? Thank you.
Thank you for the questions, Councillor Howarth. On the first point around the gap, You talk about caveats. Are you talking about conditions that may be placed on us in order to receive additional funding?
Yeah, sorry, Ben. Yeah, that's it. 2.9, you're very confident saying we've got it. So have they put any caveats on that? So they're saying that can only be spent on economic development, or can only be spent on ABC, or here's 2.9, do what you want with it.
I understand your question. I think when it comes to the additional funding for Welsh Government, you're right that some of it is expected to be earmarked. Specifically for social care and health, but because of the pressures that we see within our services, actually the earmarked funds, the pressures exceed the earmarked funds that are going towards those. So in effect, what it does is offsets some other funding available that we can redistribute to other services as required. So in effect, it all comes out in a wash, in that the additional funding goes to support the services in which it's intended. But if that exceeds the money that required, then it will just displace other funding into other directorates. So it acts as, in essence, as just an increase in our aggregate external funding. We are not, I would say at this point, 100% certain on where the funding floor is going to be, and on any grants that might make up any shortfall. But I would say that we're reasonably confident of closing out the remaining gap without going back to services and without going back to council tax. On your second question, I might bring in Jonathan Davis, our acting section 151 officer, if that's okay, because you're right to mention that actually the proportion of council tax is constructed not just from the income that we derive from it. It's also other services. There's town and community councils as well, and they all go into the council tax bill. They come to the authority, and then that gets distributed to others which are funded through council tax. So John, is there any news on when we'll have certainty from those other services?
Thank you, Councillor Callard, and thank you, Chair. Good morning, everyone. So it's very much a live situation. Councillor Howarth, we've received notification both from the police and from the community councils just this week on their proposals for their precepts. We're working through that information at the moment, and we'll be bringing that forward as part of the final budget papers. You're right in so much that that will be collated into those bills that land on doorsteps in April, and it's an important consideration. Ultimately, whilst we have an opportunity to engage and consult with those bodies, they will have their own budgets to set and different pressures on their own budgets. So, as I say, we're working through that. It's a live piece of work, and those papers will be going out as part of our final budget proposals next week, in readiness for the Cabinet on the 5th of March and Council on the 6th of March.
Chair, may I just ask then, on that basis then, on the Police and Crime Commissioners precept that will be put before Council, do we actually administrate that, and do we actually charge for the administration of that through the Council? Because I noticed something in the slides there that I think it's the 106 officer that we're going to start charging for administration. So do we actually charge for the police to administrate their funds, or how does that work, Jonathan? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So this is very heavily regulated. there are arrangements in place which are long-standing. We are unable to charge a administration fee on that, but there are strict arrangements around our council tax base, our collection rate, and how that plays into the precept that is set by the police. So the short answer to the question is no, and that is due to the regulations that are in place that restrict the arrangements around that.
Thank you, Chair. No more questions on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Jones.
Thank you, Chair. Ben, the £125,000 of the £375,000 savings for adult social care is going to be based on a staffing review within the home care teams. How does this equate with the increased demand? With the pressure on home care teams, it doesn't bode well for the delayed transfer of care patients from hospital. Previously, preventing people from returning home, in fact. So surely, realistically, this is one area that cannot afford to consolidate existing vacancies. That's one of my questions. Can I ask two, Chair, or do you want me to come back? Okay. And my second question, Ben, is what changes to youth clubs do you plan for the rural areas? It just says changes for the rural areas as opposed to the urban areas. But what does this mean? Because this has implications for the young people in those areas. Thank you.
Thank you for the questions, Councillor. I'll probably bring in. I can see we've got Councillor Ian Chandler in the chamber to answer on social care. But if it's okay, if I'll pick up your second question, we currently have a provision for rural youth services within the south of Monmouthshire. We don't have any provision in the north of Monmouthshire. We have provision which is focused on the four main towns, so Caldicot, Chepstow, Abergavenny, and Monmouth, and it's our intention to, for want of a better expression, to withdraw the service in the rural south of the county and focus our those services within the four main towns.
Come back on that, Chair. Do you mean, so will these be expanded to take on this, the extra people attending, or will it be added courses? What do you intend? Just keep the same format and expect people to be able to join? How's this going? How do you foresee this?
Yeah, so where we currently have youth service provision within the towns, those provisions will. Well, it would only affect the south of Monmouthshire because, as I said, that rural provision doesn't exist in North Monmouthshire. But where those services are required, they would be absorbed by the youth service provision within the towns rather than having a standalone service within the rural south of Monmouthshire.
Thank you. Councillor Butler.
Sorry.
I'm sorry, yeah.
My first question.
Just, yes, sorry, it's Councillor Ian, pardon me, hi. Councillor Ian Chandler is the Cabinet Member for Social Care. So thanks, Councillor Jones. So you highlighted the saving that we're projecting of £125,000 within the adult service workforce there. That's basically, it's consolidating existing vacancies. So these are vacancies that have been held for some time. So it's we've been working without those. We've been carrying those vacancies for some time and actually been working with contracting out the services there. So we feel that we can consolidate those savings without actually having an impact on the service. We think it's sustainable. I can ask Jenny Jenkins if you want to have some more detail around that, if that would be. First, Jenny, could you say a bit more on that? Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, it is a sustainable and achievable position. The vacancies are already held, and we are already embarked on some project work within the service to review how we deliver. So yes, I'm confident that we're able to sustain that position.
Thank you. Despite numbers increasing?
Yes, despite numbers increasing, because we're changing the way that we deliver the service. We've been holding those vacancies for quite some considerable time. So yes, there will be minimal impact on our ability to continue to deliver the service at the levels we require, the levels that we're seeing at the moment.
Great. Are you satisfied with? I mean, with sufficient information, not with the answers. Yes. No problem. Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Chair. And I'm going to be greedy too, because I've got two questions, if I may. The first one is around the health and social care budget. It's my understanding that the continuing healthcare funding, that the NHS is legally obliged to provide that. How successful are we in getting maximum CHC funding? Is the first question. You know, what are we doing about that? Are we able to get that? And the other one is actually, it's more specific. It's about the increased investment in key infrastructure, which I note is up 2.3 million. I note that it's predominantly for highway structures, carriageways, flood alleviation, footpaths and public rights of way. Is any of that being specified for bridge maintenance? And I refer in particular to the Chain Bridge, which will swallow an awful lot of that up. Or is it separate from that? Is that in a separate budget stream? Thank you.
I'll just come in. So thank you again, Councillor Butler. In terms of CHC funding, as you said, it's one of those issues. So if somebody's care needs are predominantly health, then therefore their care should be funded by the Health Board under the Continuing Healthcare scheme. But it's not always that straightforward to determine or to agree about whether somebody's care needs are predominantly social care needs or whether they're predominantly healthcare needs. So you're right, it does lead to a lot of discussions and negotiations, and you know, local authorities across the country do have this as a challenge, and we experience this as a challenge. So we are quite robust in how we deal with this, but there are some difficulties in there. I think I would again like to hand over to Jenny Jenkins, who's Head of Adult Social Care, to sort of explain a little bit more about that process and how we work with the Health Board on this and what we're doing both individually but also collectively as local authorities within Gwent. So please, Jenny.
Yeah, so CHC continues to be a challenge for us, accessing the funding. There's a process that we have to go to in terms of identifying the triggers for those people that tip into that healthcare part of the service, but it's very difficult to establish consistent criteria for those people. In particular, we have challenges with younger people with mental health and learning disabilities. They are the ones that are most disputed and most difficult to achieve the correct level of funding. Older people, we tend to have more success. The process is more streamlined. But across the whole of Wales, heads of service are continually discussing the challenges that we're facing by accessing funding for those younger people with mental health and learning disabilities who tend to have very expensive and challenging care needs. And I think all local authorities are embroiled in a number of cases that are long-standing where we are trying to get the right level of funding. And I think it's worth pointing out that in terms of these cases, it's not just about funding, it's about ensuring that we are getting the right type of care and oversight for people whose needs we feel are in excess of what we can provide within social care settings. So we feel that the best interests of some of these people are not being met appropriately. So I can't say any more other than to say that we've identified this issue, we've raised it with Welsh Government, we are constantly raising it, we are lobbying because there is a consistent experience of difficulty in accessing funding for this category of person. So yes, it is a challenge for us. And just to add, I saw a graph the other day that identified the increase in social care funding over a period of time, which, the line was going up and the CHC funding was just flatlining. So, that just gives you an indication of where we are nationally. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Are we seeing this? Because I'm just thinking one of the factors that we might be seeing this is that the healthcare service has been much more successful in terms of premature births and deliveries and birth injuries and so on. Are a lot of the cases in that sort of category, or is there some other area?
Well, all I can say is that these are younger people with complex needs. I'm not entirely sure of the cause of it, but we are certainly finding it difficult to find suitable placements for people within the environment of social care.
Okay, thank you. Sounds like we're going to see more of it, really, doesn't it?
Chair, is it okay if I just come in and take the question on the chain bridge?
Of course.
Thank you for the question, and I think you're right to highlight, the issue that we've got with some of our highway structures. We know we've got a significant backlog of work in that area, but with regards specifically to the chain bridge, the work required at Chain Bridge isn't specifically covered in the budget, but we have submitted a grant application to the Resilient Roads Funds in order to fund the work required on the Chain Bridge. And we should know the outcome of that application by the end of March.
Thank you for that, Ben. Let's hope that we do get it. Thank you.
Fingers crossed.
Thank you. Back to you, Councillor Howarth.
Thank you, Chair. My question, well, I got more than two, but I will start with the first one is probably directed at social care and Iron Bevan and Monmouthshire about bed blocking, and it's probably down to Tyrone really, because it does concern me that I'll explain really on the basis of is where my question's going. And so as we all know, medical and health are assessed separately. So anybody who's in hospital and needs care after, as we all know, medical is generally paid for by an Iron Bevan. So anybody who's got medical needs and wants discharging, the packages are built by an Iron Bevan through other organisations. If it's health, generally the support will possibly have to be paid for. What I want to know of Tyrone is really how much does this cost us as an authority on the basis of is when the packages aren't put together, we have bed blocking. So how do we budget for this when actually the care package has to be put together by us with other organisations, and that individual then is bed blocking in one of our main hospitals there. And Iron Bevan decide then that they will decide to move that forward and sort that out. Does that mean then we end up picking the bills up at a later date? Does that happen, Tyrone? And if it does, how much does that actually cost us? Because it's all unforeseen. Does that happen? Because I believe it does. So my question is how do we budget for that within our social care budget on the work that an Iron Bevan's doing on our behalf, whereas we don't do it and we end up having to pay for it in the long term? That's my first question. My second question is...
Councillor Howarth, do you mind if I just separate these questions up? Because they're quite
Yeah.
Quite meaty. So on that first point, I think it's Councillor Chandler wants to come in and respond to you.
Okay, yeah, no problem. Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to come in first and just sort of clarify a little bit of the context of this, and then maybe Ty can come in afterwards. My understanding from your question is in terms of that, as you said, bed blocking. It's one of the issues that's highlighted quite a lot with some of the problems and the waiting lists in the health service is the number of people that are in hospital waiting for discharge, and their discharge is dependent on them having an appropriate care package when they know. So for those patients that need a care package, is some of those delays, whether it's about residential placement or whether it's about domiciliary care so they can return to their home. There's a lot of attention being brought onto that, so it comes under the banner of pathways of care delays, and we have regular meetings with the Welsh Government looking at that, and numerous data sets that show about the different causes of any delays. So within that context, so if somebody needs a care package, if it is a social care package, if it is domiciliary care or it's residential care, then that is part of our budget. That's part of the pressures that we face in terms of that we provide that care according to the means test and the other financial assessments, same as if it was somebody that wasn't in hospital. Clearly, if their primary need is more health related rather than social related, it goes back to the previous question about continuing healthcare that we just addressed in terms of negotiation between us and the health board about who pays. But the tendency is that we would set up the package and make sure that the well-being of the person is attended to, even if we're still in negotiations about the costs of that. So I think that's what I just wanted to clarify that in the context. In terms of how much does it cost us, I'm not sure if that's an easy question to answer, because it's not, because it's just part of the packages of care that we provide to people generally. So if you're talking about the number, how much is it costing us to do while we're still in negotiation with the health board, if that's the question, then maybe Ty can illuminate that. But can I just check back with you, Councillor Howard, if that's what you meant?
I think you've actually hit the nail on the head there, is while we're in negotiation. Well, while we're in negotiation, as you know, public service doesn't move as fast as perhaps what other sectors do in negotiating. So we've got a bed block, and I think the feedback I have is actually cost, whether it's health or medical. Is that right? And Iron Bevan move quickly to unblock and get people out, wherever they're going. And then they send us a bill then, whether it's medical or health. And that's what I just want to know. How do we actually budget for that? So within your budget, all of a sudden Tyrone ends up with an Iron Bevan saying like, well, actually, this is not medical. This is health. This is not our responsibility. We've paid for this. You owe us X, Y, Z. Is that how it works? You know what I mean? And that's why I'm under the impression that's how it works, whether it's improved or not. But I just my realization is how do we actually budget for that? Because it's really difficult, and that's really where I am with it. I do know a bit about it because it's happened personally over the last few years. But I do have residents coming to me saying how long it's taken for the documents to be processed, and I shouldn't have been there. I've been there for weeks. I should have come out of there. It's cost us a fortune. I'm bed blocking. That happens all the time. I think many people would support me on saying that. So, but on the budget side of it, that's what it's about today, is how do we manage that with our budget? So if you end up with a bill drops into the financial side of it of millions, which it probably will, because you've got a massive budget there, that we have to pay an Iron Bevan back, and then we have to recharge some of that perhaps to our residents. That's where I am on that, Ian.
Sorry, again, Councillor Howard, it's not that it's the negotiation. We provide the care package and we might charge an Iron Bevan back. It's not that they would be charging us. It's that we would be charging them. So it's not that way around. I mean, we work with there. So for people that are in hospital waiting for discharge, it is that we have our own social care assessors working with health to develop the packages of care, and we're in negotiations with conversations with the patient, with the families, and with an Iron Bevan health team right from the outset as early as possible to try and get that forward. And then if we look at the stats on the reasons for delay, I mean, sometimes it is about just getting a social care assessment. It's not always that straightforward. Getting a financial assessment in terms of, how much of the package should the family be paying, and things like that. Sometimes it'll be about competency reviews. We might need a court of protection in order to make a decision, things like that. But let me just hand over to Tyrone, because I think he can talk about it in a little bit more detail. So please, Tyrone.
Thanks, Councillor Chandler. Good afternoon, Councillor Howarth. In terms of just adding to what Councillor Chandler has explained, pretty much he's hit the response on the head. In terms of hospital discharge, it could be for a multitude of reasons, Councillor. We have a number of assessors. They work in hospitals, they work with health professionals, and once the care needs assessment is done and the local authority agrees that the care needs are that of the local authority, not health, as Councillor Chan has already explained, that's when the process starts. And it becomes part of the normal budget that we've got to fund placements, whether that's domiciliary or whether that's residential. And then further on from that, as Councillor Chandler alluded to, then clients would have to undergo means tested assessment, because care provided by health at the point of delivery is free. Care provided by a local authority is means tested as laid out in the Social Services and Wellbeing Act. Does that help to add a little bit more context to that, Councillor Howarth?
Yeah, it does. The medical side of it, is an Iron Bevan. It's how you get to that side of it, who decides and who ticks the boxes, because I do believe that we actually, if you look at the bigger picture here of all this, is how many discharges we have within an Iron Bevan, within Monmouthshire per month, and the casework and the caseload there. What I'm getting at is actually, I don't know how you actually manage this budget, because sometimes that the budget may be that you've got to then back charge families for the care. So how do you actually manage that? So you say, well, you mustn't. You've got to try and retrieve that money. So you may end up with lots of debt as well. And trying to sort that out, because at the end of the day we can't continue bed blocking. The system has to improve and get quicker, more faster. So the health assessment needs the scoring, as we all know. You've got to go through the forms, fill the forms in, tick all the boxes, meet the criteria, whether it becomes health or it becomes medical. I mean, that's not a decision made by an individual. That's made by a panel. That takes weeks on some cases. On smaller cases, it may take a few weeks. What I'm trying to get at is how do you actually set your budget on this? So you may have, I don't know, £7 or £8 million of the bills to send out there, which you probably didn't know. You may only get paid £3 million of it. I don't really know. What the point I'm getting at is, how do you set your budget on all this? Is it just an open checkbook or an open invoice book? How does it work, Tyrone? Yeah, because I 75 million quid of the budget, a large part of this has got to be charged back. I just want to know how it all works and how much debt we have with it. Thank you.
It is a complicated issue, as you rightly pointed out, Councillor Howarth. In terms of our budget, a large part of that 74 million is for our externally commissioned services that purchases domiciliary care and residential care. And it does all come from the needs assessment. When someone is identified as being eligible for local authority support, that's when the process kicks in around the means tested assessment. It goes through our quality assurance panel to determine if the person is eligible for funding, and then we allocate the budget from there. It's no different whether someone's come through a hospital bed, Councillor Howarth, and is being deemed bed blocking, if you like, or whether someone's approached ourselves because their personal finances has run out. The process is the same, and we try and accommodate them in the budget the best we can. If you look at our current in-year performance,
our social care budget is overspending. We do have demands, and we do meet those demands, and the budget has to be allocated accordingly.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thanks, Councillor.
Great. Is that you done, Councillor Howarth, or do you have more questions?
No, I have one on car parking. Just the money from car parking fees have to go back into car parking. Going back some years now of issues we had with car parking. If it does, are we going to do anything in Abergavenny with the mud bath and the state of that car park down by the bottom end opposite the old police station there? Does car parking fee increase charges? I think it was quite a large sum of money there. Does it have to go back into car parking? That's one of my questions.
I can just pick that up very quickly, Councillor Howarth. It goes back into highways, so it's ring fenced, and parking income goes back into highways.
It's ring fenced and goes back into highways, not into car parks. Okay.
Not specifically.
Not specifically. Okay, thank you. Right, that's that one. I'm not happy about the rural youth clubs. That was hit on by Penny. I put in the chat bar about that. That'll be something we're going to have to look at. See if we can put an alternative budget forward. The issue of this monies for the Caldecott. Just let me have a look here. Let's have a look here. I did mention in pre-meeting. Just a second. Yeah, the monies that's been allocated for this Caldecott kind of hub or whatever. Can somebody just highlight me on that one, please, of what all that's about? It was picked up. I think it's 46,000, is it?
Are you talking about TogetherWorks or the Caldecott
Yes,
Hub?
the TogetherWorks. It's specifically around Caldecott. It was mentioned there, but we have had a little chat about it in our pre-meeting. Can you just give us an update of where we are with that one, the 46,000? I think that's it really. I'm going to save some of them for full council, etc. But I think, the Welsh language one, that was another one. What's all that about, the savings on Welsh language? I thought we were trying to promote that even more. Can you just explain where the savings are going to be met with that? And in your leisure centre one as well, you had what it said is we're going to, in the one we had a shortfall in your first summary and your first couple of slides there. Then in the later slides there, we were going to gain some kind of revenue from leisure. Just an explanation on that really. It was a bit confusing. Does that mean the leisure side of it, we've lost some grants for people who have free sessions there, or does that mean our membership's down? And are we actually going to raise all that by raising more money? Have we got a programme in place? That was something else which I picked up. That's it, Chair. I've got nothing else. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Howarth. I'll try and pick off as many of those as I can remember, and if I've missed anything,
no problem.
Just come back and remind me.
Yeah.
Welsh translation, we're not proposing to reduce any of our Welsh translation capacity. It's purely just to utilise technology in order that we can deliver it more cost effectively. So where you might have a number of individuals at the moment doing translation work, we're looking to use AI, I suppose, to do the real legwork around that, but then have people do the quality check at the end of it. So what it enables us to do is in effect reduce the labour content of the cost of delivering our Welsh translation services. So we can be confident in the quality that will be being delivered because we will still use people to do that validation, but we can reduce the costs associated with it.
So different model of delivering the Welsh portfolio, yeah?
Yes, yeah. Okay. You mentioned as well about Mon Life and the leisure centres.
Yeah,
I think there's a bit of a I guess it can be quite confusing that the way that the income shortfall across the whole of Mon Life, and when we talk about the whole of Mon Life, it's quite a big portfolio. It contains a number of assets and attractions across the authority, not just the leisure centres. So we've seen a shortfall which has put a pressure on our expected income across the whole of the Mon Life Directorate. But actually, within leisure, our income's been very strong. We've got a really attractive offering across our leisure centres. We are seeing increasing in memberships, and we are forecasting that increase to continue, you know, in order that it provides additional income to the authority in 2025. So I guess a bit of nuance there around the whole of the Mon Life Directorate and just the leisure offering.
Would it not be in the interest just to highlight that? Because I wouldn't have actually. I just want to know. So Mon Life then, it's a massive portfolio. Where is the problem then? Where we're going to make savings somewhere because something isn't working right, or we're losing money somewhere? Where is it? Is it in our outbound centres, or I mean, where is it then? I couldn't pick nothing up from there. Which is struggling, and we need to.
Well, we in effect subsidize a lot of services. Some of those operate commercially, and some of those don't operate commercially, or have a smaller commercial aspect to them. So we talk about, we talked about Old Station in Tintern. So that's a visitor attraction that we run. It takes a subsidy from Monmouthshire County Council. As part of the budget, we're doing an options appraisal there to say, okay, is this something that we want to continue subsidising? Is there a better, more efficient way to operate the services from this site for Monmouthshire, or should the private sector be delivering the services from that site rather than the local authority? And what does that look like? Similarly, when we look at the Borough Theatre in Abergavenny, the local authority provides a subsidy so the theatre can operate. It's a big cultural attraction to Abergavenny, and we're looking at ways where we can deliver the same things that the Borough Theatre offers currently, but can we do that in a more efficient way, and can we slightly reduce that subsidy? So all over the authority, we've got these services where we support the delivery of services from these areas, from within the Mon Life portfolio, because we know we know how valuable they are in terms of driving people to Monmouthshire. We talk about our museums, talk about Caldicot Castle. But it's trying to make sure we're getting the best value for money out of those while maintaining the I guess the attractions, the great work that goes on there. So I don't suppose you could really point to a particular thing and say, oh, we're not making so much money here, or we're making plenty of money there, because it's not, some of the attractions aren't really comparable. I'm not sure you could compare Abergavenny Leisure Centre to Abergavenny Castle because they offer different sorts of services.
Yeah, but my question was, is in the summary it was saying there were savings. Is that them savings there? Are they built around what you've just said? Because they are identified. That first summary there was nothing identified. Is that the identification? Is Tintern, etc.?
Yeah. Sorry, it was in the presentation that I gave, and it's part of the information on the website. So you can go see, you can go and see all the savings mandates in detail, and in fact in a lot more detail than I give in the presentation. So all the information is available if you want to scrutinise it.
Okay, right, that's that then. That's it. Well, that'll do for me. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Howarth. Just one thing I want to pick up on myself, if you don't mind. I did hear you mention the car park in Abergavenny opposite the old police station, which is Byfield Lane car park. So that's in my ward. I know you mentioned it's. I don't really recognise your description of it being kind of muddy or what have you.
Oh my gosh!
Okay,
Chair, you want to go down there someday?
I do. I walk through it.
Wellingtons.
Councillor, I walk through it every day to get to the meadows, but that's by the by.
You must have your eyes closed, Chair. Sorry.
Sorry, but my point of information, I guess, that I wanted to pick up on you with is that you said it's expensive, but it's free 6 days a week.
Expensive?
I think you said it was expensive, but it is £6 something on a Tuesday for market day, but it's free 6 days a week.
No, my point I'm making is the investment in our car parks, Chair. I was under the impression some time ago that actually any revenue raised from car parking charges or fines actually is reinvested into car parks. And then my point I made about the Byfield is actually the mess in the down park. You can't, I bet we lose 10 places there sometimes in that car park. There's 10 parking spots.
I'm sorry.
That's where I was. That's
no
where
problem.
I was with it.
Perhaps that particular car park is something you and I can discuss directly.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you.
Councillor Butler, I'm going to pick up your question first, then come to you, Councillor Jones, if that's okay, because I see that, Councillor Butler, you've asked, could the ceasing of insurance for cyber security be explained?
Chair, I was going to ask that.
Okay,
so it's fine.
Lovely.
I brought it up in pre-meet, so so it's fine. You can go through Councillor Butler if you want.
Lovely, thank you.
Thank you for the question. This one's come up a couple of times within the scrutiny of the budget, so I appreciate the opportunity to explain it. Currently, we have a cybersecurity insurance policy. It would pay out to recover costs in the event of a breach. It costs just under £100,000 a year, so it's a very expensive insurance policy. And in fact, the marketplace for insurance of this type is quite underdeveloped. So we don't feel that this insurance represents particularly good value for money. And in fact, this type of insurance is not particularly common amongst local authorities, and that's separate from our cybersecurity provisions. So we take cybersecurity very, very seriously. We work with the SRS, as you know, in order to make sure that we have got good cybersecurity provision in place. And this budget line has no impact on our cybersecurity. We know how important it is to keep our residents' data safe, but what it does do is it means that, in essence, that we self-insure ourselves in the event of a data breach.
Oh, sorry, I hadn't pressed it.
My profound apologies to Penny, if I'd completely forgotten that was your question.
That's okay. I don't mind. I just want to know if SRS are covered themselves with their own insurance, I would think, wouldn't you, as a separate entity anyway?
I'm not sure that they would be covered specifically for the costs associated with a data breach. It's quite a niche. It's quite a niche provision.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Butler, was that all you wanted to ask, or did you have an additional question? Because I see your hand is up in the chat, but I'm not sure if I've...
I do have, actually.
Go ahead.
I have another question. I'm really sorry I keep coming back.
No, it's fine.
I thought I'd put one in the chat bar to give everybody a break from my voice. Just coming back, Councillor Callard, to the savings on the Mon-Life budget. And you are praising the work of Mon-Life, and I think we have to remember that Mon-Life is very much about the quality of life for our residents. And if we tinker around with it too much and make it inaccessible to them or difficult for them, we're not doing them any favours. And the sort of savings that we're talking about for our Mon-Life provision is quite small, really, in comparison to the whole budget. But my real question actually is about where are the 110,000 savings for community hubs going to come from? For example, are there any redundancies planned? With the community hubs, I actually, my nearest community hub is Usk, and I find it difficult enough now to get through to people, and usually the people I want to speak to only work part-time. So, I find it difficult to, what do our residents think, really? How are we making those savings?
Thank you for the question, Councillor Butler. I'd start by saying that there are no changes proposed to Usk. There's no changes proposed to Gilwern. So the savings mandate is a reduction in the opening hours of our four main hubs, which is Abergavenny, Caldicot, Monmouth, and Chepstow, in order that we can help manage the demand there by still having a hub open and available throughout Monmouthshire, all the times they are currently, but adjusting those opening hours in order that we can, we can bring a budget saving forward to respond, as you've seen from the pressure that we've got within our budget.
Thank you for that answer. However, I think the point I'm making really is these are very small sums of money in terms of the whole budget. And this is the thing that impacts people, our residents the most. So by losing those opening hours, we're doing a real disservice to our community. Is it really worth it?
I take that point. I would say that the service savings across the whole of the budget tend to be made up of a large number of small numbers, if you like, in order to drive the savings. So I appreciate the point about the quantum. I also agree with you that that the services that our hubs provide are really, really useful to our residents. And when we look at across the savings that we're looking to generate within our services, there's some which we would do regardless of our financial situation because it makes good business sense to do that. And there's some that if we had the money, we wouldn't do. And I think the hubs falls firmly into that second category, that if we didn't require the savings, we wouldn't be considering this proposal.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Lucas, I see your question, but I wonder whether you feel that's been answered now, or would you like to supplement that?
Yes, please. So, are we happy that because are we happy that we might or could extend the opening hours to the leisure centres, or are we not? I mean, could we, or is it something we can look at again, please?
Yeah, I think you're alluding to the fact that in last year's budget, the opening hours of the leisure centres were changed slightly, so they close half an hour earlier in the week, and they close an hour and a half earlier on the weekend. Despite those changes, we've continued to see strong growth in our memberships across Mon Life portfolio, so it hasn't affected its performance as far as we can see from the data. And any extension of the opening hours of the leisure centres obviously brings a cost with it. So we would end up reversing the cost saving that we brought forward last year, which would add to that £23.7 million gap that we're trying to bridge within this budget. So in the light of the continued good performance of our leisure centres, since the changes at the last budget, we haven't brought forward a proposal to revert back to the previous opening hours.
Okay, thank you. But should or could in the future? Perhaps?
I would say that the changes to the opening hours that we made last year fall into the category of things which if you had the money to do, you would do. But we continue to be in financially constrained times. So unfortunately, we have to make changes to our services in order to remain, financially sustainable as an authority.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, councillors. So just as a sort of, for the future request, I wonder whether could we please contain our questions to actually asking them in the meeting rather than me reading them out from the chat, because for the benefit of the public, I think it'd be beneficial for them to hear you asking the questions rather than, they can't read the chat, only we can. But I will come back to your question, Simon, which was the 46,000 for the Together Works in Caldecott, which I know you did ask, but it was my fault. I missed leaving time for the answer.
Yes, I'm sorry as well for missing that, Councillor Howarth. So the Together Works in Caldecott, you're right, it's not part of this budget. It was never funded from our revenue budget. It was funded from the Shared Prosperity Fund. You might be aware that that fund has been cut, which has, I suppose, put the services at Together Works at risk, but I know that specifically Councillor Paul Griffiths has been working very hard on a solution in order that the Together Works can remain remain open and still provide the great services that it does. So I think some information is going to be shared about the future of TogetherWorks soon, but yeah, it falls, I suppose, outside of our budget because it is grant funded through the Shared Prosperity Fund. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, I think it was just a concern that actually if it wasn't deliverable, would we have to find £46,000 from within the budget? That was all, like, to continue.
Okay.
I think that's where I was leading, but I think more information has come before us, which might mean that we seem to have resolved the matter.
Yeah. Just for context, that £46,000 was, I suppose, what was left in the Shared Prosperity Fund that was able to be allocated into the TogetherWorks, but it was a significant reduction on their previous allocation based on the cuts that we've seen within the Shared Prosperity Fund.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, councillors. Just something I wanted to ask following on from the discussions we've had about the rural youth services. Has there been an impact assessment done around that decision?
Yeah, we've done impact assessments on all of the budget proposals.
Great, thanks, Ben. Councillors, any further questions on this item?
Chair, I just got one. We've had a bit briefing summary from Ben on the capital, but generally I thought our capital programme, etc., was really important within the budget on capital, and I don't seem to have seen anything there on it may be within the other documents which we're going to have to search online for, but I thought we may have had something within our portfolio to just get our teeth into, i.e. one of the members mentioned Chain Bridge, and Ben explained that hopefully. So I have a structure in Gilman, which is capital, which is a large sum of money, the viaduct in Gilman, which is falling down. But there are other things out there. Do we have a document on that, Ben? I.e. our schools our schools' capital funding for modernisation. Yeah, I mean, we used to have documents on them. Is there things out there, Ben, on the capital side of it which I haven't picked up yet?
Yeah, there's all the information is available in the draft budget documents. They can be found on our website. It may have been that they just weren't in the specific agenda pack that came out for this Scrutiny Committee meeting, but all the information is available on the website. It's all available to the public. So if you want to go and have a look at all of the capital proposals, they are there.
So anything we find in there which we're too late now is we're going to have to bring to full council or send you an email, is it? Just ask questions on it, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if you've got any questions between now and council, then please feel free to contact myself or the officers involved, and hopefully we can provide any information that you need.
All right, cheers, thanks.
Great, thank you both. Any further questions? No? Okay. In that case, councillors, I'm just going to hand over to Hazel to explain, rather than me generate an action list for this, because we do have full council's budget meeting before the next meeting of this committee. So Hazel's just going to explain what we're going to do with these questions.
Yeah, we've been doing this for the other two scrutiny committees that looked at the budget. We've collated sort of feedback from the committee, capturing the key points. So it's a sort of much shorter version, really, than the minutes in terms of not having all the additional items on there. But it's not a shorter version of the actual points that have been raised. So we'll capture all of the points that you've raised today and some of the responses to those, and we'll be sending that then along to officers to include in the actual council meeting going forward, so that we can evidence what scrutiny is discussed today and in the other meetings as well.
Lovely, thank you. Right then, I will just give a moment for Ben and Ian and others to leave at this point. Thank you very much for your time. councillors. Item 6, our forward work programme and action list. Councillor Jackie Strong, I think you want to say something about.
Thank you, Chair. I've just got an email, obviously, from Ian Chandler this morning, because I'm quite keen that the committee gets a chance to have some oversight on MCC plans for age-friendly status for Monmouthshire. I gather that a report is going to be written setting out actions that have taken over the past year to get to the point, and that possibly we could ask one of the officers to come to our next scrutiny meeting with the report so that we could actually gain some knowledge and oversight about their future plans. Would that be okay?
Yeah. Chair, could I just ask, perhaps at some stage we could have the Commissioner in themselves?
Yes. I think she would really welcome that.
I do too.
Thank you. So just going back to our actions from the last meeting then, we had budget invitations, which we have covered, and Tudor Street, I will discuss with officers, if that's okay, exactly what we want that to cover and when it should come to the committee. Lovely. Sorry, councillors, I was just checking where we're up to with the actions from last meeting's home search policy. So I think they have been followed up, and it's just going to be a request that those are sent forward to members of the committee. And sorry, I know we have been, let me start again. There has been a mention of dates for some of the items on our forward planner, but that is noted and will be, worked on with all haste. Councillor Butler.
Thank you. Just going back to the conversation we were having in our pre-meet about the E. Harley and goiter surgery, is that something that can be brought? I don't think it's for this committee. Could it be brought into the forward work programme somewhere, please?
Maybe a long-term future that it doesn't. Sorry, Jan, you probably didn't hear that. I'm saying I
didn't know.
There's lots of legal implications at the moment, which would put us in an invidious position. But also, perhaps when it's all over, which may be, sometime this year, to make sure, towards the end, to make sure it never happens again. I think that's what we've got to stop. Old ABUHB, perhaps. Not to account. Yeah.
I just feel that it's something that we should be letting our residents know that we are very much aware of, and that we are trying to respond to the situation. But I don't think it would be for this committee. But can it be raised in some other way?
Thank you, Councillor.
Committee.
Yeah, we're wondering whether that might be Public Services Committee, but we're not sure at this point. Somebody will
Chair,
check.
Which, because we have had various sort of discussions about dentistry, which committee does that?
It's Public Services.
It's Public Services.
Yeah, it deals with the health issues.
Chair, may I just intervene there, because I think Penny's made a very, very valid point there, and she probably knows a little bit more with a role she leads. There are legal sides to all this as well, and I do know public domain that there are legal cases going on against the practice also, and I think I would probably just seek a little bit of advice on our side as an authority.
Yeah, I totally agree. I know the recording.
Toes.
Yeah.
And I just off the back of what is public domain and not public domain, there's probably a lot out there which isn't public domain. But you're quite right there, Councillor. We need to make sure it's a key risk. I find what's happened in Blaenau Gwent there, not very far from here. Lots of my residents actually are registered with that practice. It is a massive risk to any practices that are operating in Monmouthshire at the moment, which you highlighted was your within your ward and surrounding areas. So it is a key risk. It's not our key risk, but it does involve us with our residents. And I know with Gilwan closure of our surgery, with the Crickhowl practice, how much work has to go on as councillors and officer time as well in resolving that. It drops on our plate as well. So yes, I think we're rightly to keep it under scrutiny. But I think to go into it too deep, I think would not be right. And I think we should just seek some legal side of that and make sure that we do that right. And actually direct it to public services and ask them and say, look, this has been highlighted. Let them handle that.
Councillor, I'm just going to, I think maybe we're going around in circles a little here.
Okay.
Where there are outstanding legal cases and legal actions, it won't really be, it's not really something we can go ahead and scrutinise because we'll be awaiting outcomes from a completely different process. I understand the frustrations, but there are discussions ongoing with the health board about issues that we can sort of functionally, usefully scrutinise. I would say at this stage, this is likely not to be one of those, but we can keep an eye on the situation as it develops.
Okay, thank you for that.
No problem.
Just talking my lawyer hat down there.
I'm sorry, Councillor Howarth. I was just saying Cabinet and Council Planner, item 7. Is there anything that anybody's picked up on that they would like to bring to the committee? No, well, we can always revisit that. And finally then, item 8, to confirm the minutes of the previous meeting from the 21st of January. Is anybody willing to propose those as a true and accurate record, or any amendments required? Thank you, Councillor Strong. Do you have a second? Thank you, Councillor Jones. Thank you very much. Right, our next meeting is on the 2nd of April at 10 a.m. Thank you very much, councillors.